Hello, everyone, and welcome to Slash Film Daily for Thursday, March 14th, 2019. On today's episode, we're going to talk about the latest film and TV news. This is Slash Film Editor-in-Chief Peter Sciretta, and joining me today is Slash Film Weekend Editor Brad Oman.
Hey, that's me.
And writers Hoai-Tran.
Hey, everyone.
And Chris Evangelista.
Hello, folks.
Okay, at the beginning of yesterday's podcast, I mentioned that Twitter was getting rid of the likes and retweet numbers. Apparently, like everything online, we were freaking out over nothing, and they're just like hiding it under like you expanding like a little bit of the tweet. So don't worry, guys; those numbers are still going to be there. And Chris, people could still see how popular your retweets are.
Yeah, but that's like an extra step. Who wants to take that step? I want to just be there, like a banner, like I'm wearing a sash that says
Chris
most
is popular.
Yeah, I don't want it to. I don't want people to have to go through the effort.
Yeah. You know, I actually wish there was a way that I could see like what the most retweeted or liked things on my timeline were, because then I could see what's important.
Isn't there a way? I guess there isn't. Yeah,
I don't think there is.
The algorithm doesn't do predict specifically that. It just shows what you might be interested in, which is not particularly like the most liked or retweeted things.
Okay. Guys, we got to get into the news. We got to talk about movies. Let's talk about Pet Sematary, which, Chris, you're going to see when, this weekend?
Yes, Saturday night. I am flying to Austin tomorrow, and Saturday night I will be seeing it at South by Southwest.
But unfortunately, Chris, you're not going to be seeing it in 4DX.
I know. This news broke, and I was I'm like, maybe I'll cancel my trip and go see it in 4DX instead, because Paramount is now screening, not now, but eventually sometime this year, is planning to screen Pet Sematary in 4DX. 4DX is, of course, the ultra immersive cinema experience where the chairs shake and they shoot water at you and fog comes out and there are scents. It's 3D plus smell-o-vision plus I don't even know. It's a whole thing.
It's actually even more than that. There's like things like things that can poke you in the back. There's things that can like touch the back of your legs. So when I actually have done am I the only one here who has seen a movie in 4DX? I'm assuming.
I think
Yeah,
so.
I've never done it.
Yeah, I would not recommend it, but I have seen what was that? The Rock movie San Andreas, yeah. And I saw one of the Michael Bay Transformers movies in 4DX.
Oh, that sounds like a nightmare.
Yeah, they were both nightmares, but there was a point where they were on Cybertron and there was like these little snake like robot things going around, and like then they would like go by your legs and you'd feel it, and like it would touch you on the back. And like I was thinking when I was watching that film then, I was like, how great would this be for a horror movie? But sadly, usually horror movies aren't big enough to be played in like this 4DX format. But I think this could actually be a lot of fun.
Yeah, I don't actually disagree. In general, the 4DX experience sounds like a nightmare for someone like me because I'm very hypersensitive to, just anything or anyone just touching me or loud noises. Like, I don't really like that, but I'm so excited for Pet Sematary that I kind of wish I had a 4DX theater near me. I don't have one near me, so I think the closest one to me is New York. So if the owners of 4DX are listening, feel free to send me a free ticket to the 4DX screening in New York, and maybe I'll take the train to see it.
They offered you a 4DX screening for something last year, right? Like, I forget what it was.
I think it was Skyscraper. It was something that was not worth driving to New York for, but I would do it for this. So I'm just putting it out there.
I got to hear, HT, would you be interested in seeing a horror movie in 4DX?
Probably not. That sounds like my nightmare. I'm very just skittish person, so it probably would be much like more intense for me. I mean, I'm interested in seeing a 4DX movie at some point, but a horror movie might be like too far into the deep end for me. I want to start off a little bit easier.
Brad, how about you?
I mean, I don't know.
You just have no interest in the format whatsoever?
Yeah, just like I've been on theme park rides that seem like that's what this is, and like I don't know. I feel like I only want to be physically stimulated so much when I'm watching a movie, and I already don't really like 3D that much, and this feels just like a sensory overload to me. So I mean, I don't know. Maybe I might enjoy it. I think it probably just depends on the movie and how extensive it is and how invasive it is upon all of my senses. But I would fully support them releasing a whole bunch of mangy cats into a Pet Sematary screening.
I will give you a bit of advice. If you ever end up doing a 4DX screening, go see a movie that's like 90 minutes, not a movie that's like 2 hours and 45 minutes, like the first 4DX movie I saw, which was one of those Transformers films. I don't know. The thing for me about this is if it was used subtly and used like, you know, in moderation, I think it could be cool. But the problem with 4DX is that people pay like, I think it might even be like $40 a ticket or something insane. Like it's a really expensive ticket to see a movie in 4DX. So then the people that program these 4DX like experiences, they're like, we need to give them their money's worth. So every single scene has something. Do you know what I mean? Like, so there's like, you know, if it starts raining, there's, you know, water on you. Like, you know, if you're driving, the thing's moving. It's not like, you know, it's almost used too much, so much that it loses its effectiveness, if that makes sense. So I hope, I
can't even, I don't even know like what they're gonna do for this particular movie. I mean, like I can imagine like, because there's like fog in the Pet Sematary, so they'll pump out fog. But beyond that, I can't really think of what it's going to be. So it's
they'll throw live cats at the audience.
I hope not. That would be alarming.
Well, there's also like lighting effects. It looks like you can make it look like there's like lightning going on in the cinema. There's fans, so like I'm guessing if there's like some kind of windy scene, you could feel the cats going by your legs. I'm trying to think what other effects they do. They also have they can do scents. So maybe if the cats poop or something, you could smell the poop.
Well, you know, there's a lot of like things that come back from the dead. So maybe it's just like foul grave smells just being.
This sounds terrible.
Yes, yeah. I don't know who would enjoy this. Like, oh, it smells like a corpse in here.
You know how you love movies? How about shit?
You know, in the Transformers movie that I saw, like there was someone that got like burned to death in the movie. I think. I
thought you meant in the audience. I was like, oh my god.
No. I think like T.J. Miller or someone.
Yeah, T.J. Miller got scorched entirely.
Yeah, so they chose to use the smell effect on that. So like the smell that we got was scorched human being.
God.
Barbecue.
That's dark.
Yeah. Okay, let's move on. Let's talk about One Day at a Time. This is a popular Netflix TV series, but apparently not popular enough. It's getting canceled. HT, what do we know?
You may remember last year when Brooklyn Nine-Nine got canceled, celebrities like Lin-Manuel Miranda rallied around the show and basically saved it from cancellation. Turns out Lin-Manuel Miranda is not all-powerful, and he and the passionate fan base for One Day at a Time could not save this show. So One Day at a Time was canceled by Netflix after 3 seasons. It's a modern-day revamp of the show from the 1970s and was a critically acclaimed show that was praised for its diversity and its stellar writing, but it seems that its incredibly passionate fan base could not save it, like you said, and it was canceled, but it may be picked up by another network or company.
That is so weird. I feel like Netflix used to be the company that would be the one doing all the saving of shows that were pulling in the ratings, but now the door has turned. It's like now, will Disney save the Marvel Netflix shows? Who's going to save this? I'm just wondering, like, if someone's going to save One Day at a Time, will they get the entire catalog of those other seasons? Or like, I feel like if I was Netflix, I would want to keep on to that because their whole point was to build up, like a lot of content that people will not want to leave their service because they're just keep on binging, keep on going.
That's a good question. I don't know because I remember American Vandal, when it was canceled, was looking for a new home too, but that was outsourced. It was not from, it was a Netflix original, but not made by,
Yeah.
made within Netflix. It was another studio that made it. So it would make sense for all of that series to go to another home, but it never actually got picked up. So we never really see what would happen in that case. But One Day at a Time, I think, was a wholly Netflix production. So I don't really know.
I do wonder if Disney decides to save those Marvel Netflix series, like in 2 years they can make more. And if they actually decided to make more with those actors, would they pay Netflix to get those prior seasons over onto Hulu or something? Or are we just like past that? Do we just think that they're just going to create new versions of these characters?
I think they're just going to remake it.
Yeah.
As good as Charlie Cox and everyone is, it's probably just going to be rebooted again.
Yeah. Okay, let's move on to DirecTV. They have a service called Now, which is for cord cutters. It's streaming. It's a way to stream their cable offerings. They have announced that they are kind of raising prices and losing channels. Actually, some of my friends have this, and the only reason they had DirecTV was to have these Viacom channels, and they're going to be losing those Viacom channels and raising the prices higher than the other places. So, what do we know about this, Brad?
Yeah, so like you said, DirecTV Now is one of the many options out there that you have if you want to cut your cord with their cable subscription, but still want access to live television that you just stream instead of paying for, the coaxial cable that comes out of your wall. And one of the better options up until recently was DirecTV Now. They had pretty reasonably priced packages. They provided a lot of channels. Even when they raised their prices by $5 across the spectrum last year, it was still a really good deal. But for whatever reason, seemingly because the subscription plans they had in place before could not be sustained by that price point and still be profitable for the company, they've completely revamped their entire package offering. So now there are only two subscription tiers that you can order. There's the Plus package for $50, the Max package for $70, but they don't offer nearly as many channels as the package did before because, like you said, they got rid of a bunch of the Viacom channels that they used to have access to. So we're talking about channels like MTV, Nickelodeon, VH1, Comedy Central. Those channels are all going away. AMC, BET, History, TLC are all other channels that used to be part of DirecTV Now service, but are now all gone, no matter which of the packages you get. So the only, I guess, upside of this is now if you subscribe to DirecTV Now, the Plus package for $50 includes HBO, and the Max package for $70 includes HBO and Cinemax. So you don't have to pay a separate subscription for that. Another bit of somewhat good news is that if you're already a subscriber to DirecTV Now, you can hold on to your current subscription package and you won't lose any of the channels that you already have access to. However, all of those old subscriptions will go up by $10 starting on April 12th. And on top of that, if you also pay for HBO for the extra $5 that it used to cost for that package, that price is going to go up to $15. So now you're going to end up paying basically an extra $20 for whatever previous package you had along with HBO. That kind of sucks, especially because back when AT&T made their acquisition of Time Warner, they actually made a case for the fact that they weren't really going to raise prices for consumers and that prices would actually be reduced. But this seems to be the exact opposite of that promise. So never trust a corporation, I suppose. But yeah, so that's pretty sucky, and this honestly makes DirecTV Now one of the worst options on the table. Although, to be fair, every single TV streaming service like this, except Sling, has gotten rid of the Viacom channels. Apparently, there's some kind of thing that makes it too expensive for them to keep the Viacom channels. I don't know if Viacom is just particularly dickish about how much it costs to have the channels included on their packages or what, but that's how it's going.
It's really annoying. I'm curious, what do you guys do? Brad, how do you watch TV?
I still pay for cable. I have Xfinity, and it is a little bit on the pricier side, but I'm the kind of person who I like having a DVR so that I can record channels shows and go back to them whenever I want to. There are some shows that I watch that aren't necessarily immediately available on a streaming service like Netflix or even Hulu.
You do realize services like DirecTV Now and PlayStation View have DVRs, right?
I do realize that, but they also don't allow you the ability to record every show. So there are some shows that don't get recorded like right away when they do, and I just like the convenience of the DVR on cable, especially when it comes to stuff like live programming and things like that, which doesn't always work out well. So yeah, I still pay for cable. It's worth it for me only because my options out here in the Midwest aren't super plentiful. And even if I were to cancel cable, the amount that I would pay for internet by itself ends up being a little closer to the total cost of what I pay now for internet and cable, where it's just worth it for me to pay for both.
Yeah, I have PlayStation View, and I've tried like all the services. I've tried DirecTV Now, I've tried YouTube TV or whatever it is. And PlayStation View seems to be the best one for me, but that's still missing all those Viacom channels that you mentioned, and even some channels that I liked, like A&E and stuff like that. Chris, what do you use?
My wife and I, we have cable, we have Verizon, but we never watch it. We watch pretty much everything through like Hulu at this point, because we don't really watch a lot of like normal TV shows. And I would love to just get rid of cable entirely and only have internet, but I don't know how this works, but they have this like scam set up where every time you call and say, hello, I'd like to just cancel cable and keep internet, they say, well, to do that, your bill will go up if you only have cable. You need to have both to have a lower bill. And we always say, all right, never mind. We'll keep cable and never watch it.
Yeah, I think I'm paying $10 or $20 more a month for my internet because I don't have like a cable service through my cable provider. HD, you're like completely cut the cord, right?
Yeah, I've completely cut the cord at this point. My apartment building, it's more expensive to have cable rather than the opposite. So we just decided to not get it. And I've just watched everything on streaming services now.
Yeah, I think that's what most people are doing. I just don't understand. Like the promise of these streaming services and cutting the cord was all about me being able to subscribe to the channels I wanted and get like a la carte programming and not be, lumped into these big package deals. And now DirecTV is now going down to only 2 packages. So like the options are becoming even more limited, which is just to me like sad. Hopefully, I'm wondering, whatever Apple has up their sleeve, I'm hoping it gives the consumer more options, but we'll have to see. Let's move on to a story that we wanted to get to yesterday, but we couldn't because we had that big Marvel news that hit, and that is Stephen King's The Talisman movie might actually finally happen. Chris, what do we know?
This film has been a long time coming. Steven Spielberg snapped up the rights to this book. It was a book written by both Stephen King and British horror author Peter Straub. Spielberg bought the rights to this 2 years before it even came out. It even hit bookshelves. So that's how excited he was about making this a movie. And he spent years trying to get it made, and he just couldn't crack it. At one point, it was going to become like a TNT miniseries, and then that didn't happen. And then at another point, Frank Marshall was going to direct it as a movie, and that didn't happen. And now, apparently, it really is finally happening. Amblin is still producing, and Mike Barker, who is a director on The Handmaid's Tale, is going to direct the film. I'm not really familiar with his work, so I can't get too excited about that. But, like I said, this film has been in development, one stage of development on and off for, the last several decades. Yeah. So the fact that it's finally happening is kind of interesting.
What is The Talisman about?
It's a very, it's not really your typical Stephen King-ish story. It's really complicated and weird, but it boils down to basically there's this boy and his mother is dying, and the boy ends up in this alternate dimension where they're
By the way, so far this sounds like the Dark Tower movie that I saw.
Well, it's like all Stephen King things. It is actually tied into the Dark Tower, but this boy ends up in another dimension, and in this other dimension there are I don't want to call them clones, but there's like alternate versions of us there. They're called Twinners. And it's just this very strange, trippy sort of, it's like a road trip story, but the road trip is through this alternate dimension.
Yeah. Well, this has been in the works for so long that I'll believe it when I see it. When they actually, announce a release date. Let's move into Rotten Tomatoes. We've been talking a lot lately about how toxic fanboys have been gaming the fan rating on Rotten Tomatoes, and Rotten Tomatoes has been doing a really poor job at responding to this and setting up barriers of entry to prevent this from happening. But it sounds like they might have a plan. HT, what do we know?
Yeah, last month, Rotten Tomatoes dramatically revamped its audience scoring system to sort of try to prevent online trolls from skewing the audience scores for films that hadn't come out yet. So the obstacle that is in place right now is that no user post can be made before the film is released in theaters. And now, according to The Hollywood Reporter, additional measures are being considered to tighten those guidelines and combat trolls further. So these additional measures would amount to a sort of two-step process in which the user would have to verify that they had seen the film in question before they posted a critique.
How would you even monitor this though? Like, how would that work?
Well, it's possible because Rotten Tomatoes is owned by Fandango that they could strike some sort of deal with this. Fandango is a ticket buying service, and it's possible if users buy a ticket through Fandango, that could be considered the verification for them to then post to Rotten Tomatoes what they think about that movie. And this is intended to basically distinguish between the actual troll posts and people who are genuinely have a negative opinion of the movie.
See, this would be good, but it would also prevent someone like me who uses AMC A-List to see movies or goes and sees the press screening. But I guess I fall into the critic meter. Anyways.
Yeah, you don't need to be in the audience review, Peter.
Yeah, I did. I mean, we did mention in our Slack channel, there's a film festival going on right now. Jacob's at South by Southwest, and I used to actually look at the Rotten Tomatoes, the audience rating during film festivals just to get a gauge of what the buzz is from non-critics on movies. And because they put this the other thing into place that you mentioned, that no one can rate a movie, or the rating for the movie doesn't show up until the day of release. Now you can't do that with film festivals, which is, I mean, I know that's such a minor thing, and so few people are doing that, so that's not a big problem here. But I just wonder, Brad, do you think there's a way they can actually verify everybody that's seen a movie? If I buy a ticket, am I gonna take a photo? How is it gonna work?
Yeah, I mean, there has to be a way kind of similar to the way I guess Facebook works, or the way comment section on the internet work, is where I think you should have to link it to an account that actually has to verify your identity. So that way, when you're saying something online, it's linked to you and it's you saying it, not some stupid avatar that could be anybody saying something. So I don't know. I'm I'm to the point where I just wish people would just stop, because I'm so sick of this nonsense. Just grow up and stop being terrible trolls and people. What are you accomplishing by this?
I know. Why are they dedicating all this time to review bombing a movie that doesn't even get impacted by their troll attack?
Yeah. Well, I mean, they would like to point to movies that seem to have been affected, and not the ones that actually, Captain Marvel obviously had that troll bomb, and that did not affect that box office at all. I do wonder, do you think these people are so crazy, these toxic fanboys are so crazy, that they would actually buy a ticket to the movie so that they can rate their 1 out of 10 vote on the service?
Oh, absolutely. If anything, just because they're just stupid enough to do something like that. We're talking about a group of people where some of them were saying you should go support Alita Battle Angel instead of seeing Captain Marvel, because that'll show them. Go give money to the studio that's being bought by Disney, you fucking morons.
let's talk about a story that hit yesterday, or we've been following for a while. There's this Michael Jackson documentary on HBO that is about these two victims.
Accusers
is probably the best word. That said Michael Jackson had molested them as children. In the wake of that, Michael Jackson's songs have been pulled off many radio stations, and also Fox pulled the Simpsons episode that featured Michael Jackson, and finally we got an answer why. Brad, what do we know?
Yes, so as we heard last week, the episode Stark Raving Dad, which was the third season premiere of The Simpsons back at the height of its popularity, was pulled after some of the creative team on The Simpsons had seen Leaving Neverland and felt like they didn't want that episode to be out there anymore. And there was a statement that had gone along with it, but showrunner Al Jean was a little bit more specific and even offered a certain perspective on what made them feel like that this episode shouldn't be out there anymore. And it wasn't something they wanted to support as being, part of their history, I guess. Obviously it inevitably is, but they just didn't want it to be out there anymore, maybe accomplishing what he thought it would. And what Al Jean says is the decision, it wasn't something that makes me happy. It's something I agree with completely. What saddens me is if you watch the documentary, which I did, and several of us here did, and you watch that episode, honestly, it looks like the episode was used by Michael Jackson for something other than what we'd intended it. It wasn't just a comedy to him. It was something that was used as a tool, and I strongly believe that. And to be more specific, he goes on, I think it was part of what he used to groom boys. I really don't know, and I should be very careful because this is not something I know personally, but as far as what I think, that's what I think, and that makes me very, very sad. So that's he's very careful to say that it's speculation on his part. There's no, proof or evidence that it was something that Michael Jackson used to groom boys to make them trust him, and so that he could, do these things that he's accused of. But his perception, it makes sense because if, a sexual predator like that will do things to make sure that their victims, trust them, and appearing in one of the most popular cartoons at the time is something that would make him seem very likable and not so intimidating. We're talking about a series here that was used to sell Butterfingers back in the day, simply because Bart Simpson was so popular. So it's not out of the realm of possibility that this is something that Michael Jackson used to make himself appear, more trustworthy.
Society has changed a lot. Like we used to I think mock the accusers, and now we're listening to them and believing them. I don't know. I have not seen this documentary. Chris, I know you have, right?
Yes, I have.
So I haven't seen it yet. I did follow a lot of this when it happened, with the court case and the media reports at the time. And, it's such a weird thing. Should we be retroactively be erasing Michael Jackson from our lives based on this documentary? How should we morally handle this documentary, I guess is what I'm asking.
Are you asking me or just the group?
Yeah, I'll ask you, since I think you're the only one who might have seen it. HC, have you seen it?
I haven't seen it yet. I know Chris reviewed it for the site.
Yeah.
I really don't. It's so tricky because, it's so weird because, Michael Jackson, he's dead now. Not that excuses what he did or allegedly did. And it's just so different because, there's this thing where people who are still making art or trying to make art and they've been, found out or called out on their terrible actions. And that, for some reason, that feels different to me than someone who's died and you can't really hold them accountable anymore. Like I said, that doesn't excuse anything. And it's like a year thing, like a decade thing. If I found out someone from an actor I loved from 30 or 40 years ago was a terrible person, it's harder to be like, well, I'm done with that because it happened so long ago and they're dead. But at the same time, these accusations are so serious and so disturbing. And for a long time, people just sort of ignored it. I remember when I was a kid, I liked Michael Jackson's music, but at the same time, it was just sort of common knowledge that he was quote unquote, a weirdo. And whether or not we all knew he was guilty. It just felt like society as a whole knew there was something wrong with him, and we all just sort of just went along with it. And I also feel like after he died, like there was this shift where it was like everyone stopped talking about these allegations, and it just became like, oh, he died too soon, and what a great artist he was. So maybe I've come full circle here, and I'm saying like we sort of forgave him after he died, and we probably shouldn't have, and maybe it is time to take stock of that.
Sorry, go ahead, Peter.
Is there also an aspect that he's not alive to rebut any of these claims or to respond to these claims? I mean, not that he hadn't already responded to stuff like.
Yeah, but it's like that too. It's like, because even if he were alive, he would just be saying, in theory, he'd be saying the same thing he said at the time, where they're in it for the money and so on.
Yeah. What were you gonna say, Brad?
That definitely plays a big part of it, because, and I think this is probably the trickiest situation that we've had, since accusers have been listened to more and people have been taking more active stances and action when it comes to holding famous people, especially, responsible for these, heinous sexual crimes, allegations, and things that they've done. Because Michael Jackson is easily the most famous person who has been accused of things like this, and probably the most influential person that has faced something like this. I mean, his songs are everywhere, in movies, television, all over the radio. He has influenced countless artists, and so it's hard to just flat out cut something like that out of culture in general. Like, I know that ever since this documentary came out, everyone's been talking about it. When I hear a Michael Jackson song now, I kind of feel weird about it. It doesn't stop me from liking the music or like acknowledging that it's good, because his music had a big part of my life, growing up. I had Michael Jackson cassettes and stuff like that. But it's definitely something that is extremely hard to come to terms with. I for one, personally, I'm not sure how to. Like, I can't see myself suddenly not listening to Michael Jackson, having that staunch of a stance against it. But it does make me feel weird now and uncomfortable about it. It's like that. It was like that after, the Kevin Spacey stuff came out. I didn't really feel inclined to watch any movies with him in it. I have seen movies with it since then. I watched Baby Driver again not too long ago. And there are movies that I really like that have him in it, but it's not the same anymore. And I think it's something that's really hard to come to terms with and figure out. I think it's really just up to every individual person as to what they need to do. But it's on the more public scale, it's hard because we can't go back and erase these moments or pull them back. Like, you can't go back to 13 going on 30 and change that entire sequence where they do the Thriller dance just because Michael Jackson is an accused, molester. So it's really tough.
But it's weird that it taints these old. I do have a question to ask you guys. In my wardrobe consists of graphic T-shirts mostly, and I own 2 graphic T-shirts that feature Michael Jackson. One, it's for Captain EO, the Disneyland George Lucas produced, Francis Ford Coppola directed 3D film, and one that it's him and E.T. I have not worn these T-shirts this year at all. Since I found out this documentary was going to be playing at Sundance, and I've been conflicted. Should I get rid of these T-shirts? Or those are 2, I love Captain EO. I love E.T. and that image of him and E.T. is something that brings me with a nostalgic joy, but I don't want to be supporting someone that maybe did these things. I mean, I guess maybe the question is, why did I buy these before? Because, I knew about the allegations before. HT, do you have any thoughts on this?
It's a difficult situation, like Brad and Chris so eloquently put. I don't have a clear answer either, just because I do think it does differ from person to person, and it is hard to especially take in stock the influence and impact that Michael Jackson's legacy had on pop culture at large. And yeah, I think there is sort of a difference because he is dead, and that by supporting his works or still liking his works, we're not actively supporting him. But it's difficult to say, and I do think that we should acknowledge and use our knowledge of these allegations to sort of take into account how we view that legacy. There's actually, not to reference an SNL anything, but Pete Davidson was actually on SNL's last week, I think, and he spoke about sort of all these allegations with R. Kelly and Michael Jackson, and he compared it to following the Catholic Church. And he said that basically, people believe in these things and people enjoy these things, but you still have to acknowledge that, these people were troubled and victimized and hurt a lot of people. So whenever you listen to a Michael Jackson song, it's like, oh, he harassed and assaulted all these young boys. And that's kind of how you have to just kind of keep that in mind whenever it's it sounds like a very reductive way of saying it, but I feel like he had a good point in that we can't erase what they did and what they contributed to pop culture and to art. But we still have to keep in mind constantly who they hurt.
Yeah, if you haven't seen that Pete Davidson bit from Weekend Update Saturday Night Live last week, it's edgy and controversial and hilarious, but very also poignant and has a very good perspective on it. It's a smart piece by Pete Davidson.
Okay, we will link that in the show notes. We were also going to talk about this Avengers Endgame trailer that hit this morning, but we've gone way over time talking about this Michael Jackson thing. But I think this is an important conversation to have. But you can find that trailer linked in the show notes, and we'll also link Brad's trailer breakdown where he goes through frame by frame and tries to find some insight into the movie. Brad, what do you think the biggest, most interesting insight you found in that trailer was?
Easily the biggest insight is this trailer shows more than any other piece of marketing we've seen so far that there is a significant time jump somewhere in this movie. There are two shots in particular that show a drastic change in Black Widow's hairstyle. The sequence at the very end where Captain Marvel meets Thor, Black Widow can be seen standing nearby with her short blonde hair that we saw her have in Avengers Infinity War. But one of the shots where she's talking to Steve Rogers at Avengers headquarters, her blonde hair has clearly grown out almost entirely, taken over by her original red hair again. So there's a significant passage of time here, and even the shot with Scott Lang, where it looks like he just got back from the quantum realm, he's looking around, there's all these missing posters on a street pole, and an abandoned house. Those missing posters have been there for a while. There's a lot of weed growth on the house. So when he comes back, a significant amount of time has passed, maybe years, since the snap. And so when he meets the Avengers again, it's probably been a while since they've faced that defeat. So whatever that means for our heroes, for the fate of Thanos, remains to be seen. But there's clearly a gap in time here that will take place in this movie.
Yeah. And I think this is a brilliant piece of marketing from Disney. It uses a lot of footage and clips from, the last 10 years of the MCU. And then at the end, it leaves you with a button featuring Captain Marvel, which I think this is so well-timed. This is coming out on a Thursday when Captain Marvel's going into her, second weekend? Basically it's kind of like, go see that movie if you want to get excited for Endgame. It's just so brilliant. But, okay, we got to cut it off here. You can find more of all of the stories we talked about in today's podcast linked in the show notes and on slashfilm.com. This podcast, Slash Film Daily, is published every weekday on iTunes, Google, Overcast, Spotify, all the popular podcast apps. Please feel free to send us your feedback, questions, comments, concerns to us at peter@slashfilm.com. Please head on over to our iTunes page, tell your friends, spread the word, and we'll see you tomorrow.